Well, you find out whether they want to or something. It's not an approval, it's a discussion.
Okay. Nice.
Oh, the points. Indeed. I have.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to all of our committee members, our independent members, and those joining us in the chamber today and online. I'll just call for any apologies. I don't think we have any today. Or is Sven? He's online. No apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? Mayor Timder?
Just for the parking strategy, probably down at the harbour, having a business in that area, I thought I should probably not be part of any discussions in that space.
Thank you. Moving on to 4.1, confirmation of the non-confidential minutes. Moved. Seconded, Councillor Lewis. Any discussion? Okay, so move on to reports of the Chief Executive. Sorry. Oh, yes. Everyone happy to receive those, true and correct? Against? That's carried. So item 5.1, Ōamaru parking strategy, and I'll introduce Andrew Bardsley to Mr. Cook.
Thank you very much, everybody. So you have the paper in front of you, but what we're really looking for today is a good discussion as we start to form up the strategy, which will come back to you for approval at a future date. I think the important thing is context to remember is that this started many months ago, back in the previous triennium, when initially we were asked as officers to come up with ideas and options to raise money and reduce dependency on rates, which is why we still have the additional paid parking areas in the paper for consideration. You'll also remember that we recently installed new meters along with a certain amount of controversy. And at that point, council asked officers to come back with a parking strategy. And it was commented at that meeting, I believe by Councillor Lewis, that part of the problem is that we have made this very complicated. And so the communications around it, the understanding of it has been particularly difficult. So when Mr. Bardsley presents his presentation, I make no apology that every other slide reminds us to keep it simple. Because in such discussions, it's very easy to come up with idea, and then we end it with a very complicated parking strategy and parking regime. And that's very hard for officers to deal with, but also hard for the community to deal with. So I really encourage you to focus every other slide where it says keep it simple. I'll now hand over to Mr. Bardsley.
Thank you, and through the chair.
as Mr. Cook said, the parking strategy has been something that's been long overdue, and we've had so many different iterations of parking over the years in relation to COVID, having 6 months of free parking after COVID, then 2 hours of free parking, followed by an hour of free parking. So we have the opportunity here today to just look at parking, a parking overview. The first part will be on the Ōamaru CBD and the paid parking areas. And we'll talk about the 1 hour free parking, as well as the options around the parking permits for the over 80s, which was suggested at the last parking meeting. And then the second part, we'll look at additional paid parking areas, Ōamaru CBD going down to the Victorian precinct and the harbour area. So currently we have a bit of a complicated system where we technically have 2 hours of free parking. So way back before my time, and I can't find anything to say how this was implemented, although a councillor from back then who's now a resident up at one of our retirement villages remembers implementing the paid parking and the reasons for doing that. So here in Ōamaru, we have paid parking starts at 10 a.m. We're the only territorial authority in New Zealand that has any sort of parking regime that starts at 10 a.m. So basically what that is, between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. we have free parking, and then we also have the 1 hour free parking that people can utilise anytime. So effectively what we have is you can park in one of our paid parking areas here in Ōamaru till lunchtime for $2. So we effectively have 2 hours of free parking. And I just wanted to lay that out because it seems to be forgotten, and it's just an accepted norm now that we have parking that starts at 10 a.m. The 15-minute period that's in the bylaw in regards to people entering their registrations has become somewhat of a de facto 15 minutes. People are interpreting as, I have 15 minutes to go into the shop and do my shopping or do whatever I want. I don't have to enter my registration details into the parking machine. That's not the case and not the intention of the bylaw. Some people have interpreted that it means that they have 75 minutes of free parking. So they can use 50 minutes and then add it on to the hour. And we've had all of these types of explanations and people interpreting it different ways. And again, we need to keep it simple. And this all adds up to basically a pretty unconventional parking policy in regards to what other territorial authorities do around New Zealand. They keep it simple and have their parking pretty much from 8 a.m. till 6 or 9 till 5 or some sort of iteration of that. So what we really need to do is we need to look at standardising our paid parking enforcement periods, and if we're going to look at doing that, we need to also look at removing that reference to the 15 minutes in the bylaw. So the requirement is, if you want to come and park in Ōamaru paid parking areas, you're required to enter your registration plate into the machine. That helps with the enforcement side of things. Make sure that people are using the 1 hour free if we retain that correctly, and that everyone's getting a fair go. So again, simplifying the parking, we have our 1 hour free parking. It causes confusion. At the moment, since the 4th of December, when the new meters went live, it allows us now through the technology that we have to look at the dashboard, and we get a really good idea of where our busiest areas are, what days of the week are our busiest, what times are our busiest, and we keep an eye on our revenue. So what's happened is the initial first couple of weeks, the revenue went up, and now it's plateaued at about $2,300 a week is where we're sitting with our revenue. Now, what we can also do is we can also look at the breakdown of the people just using the 1 hour free as opposed to those who are actually paying. So that 2,300 comes from around 1,200 users. And there's also an average of 3,000 people per week using the 1 hour free. So that shows you the sort of the uptake. So we're getting around 4,500 people using our parking infrastructure per week, the paid parking. and 3,000 of those people are just entering their plates and not doing any payment for the 1 hour free.
So shall we stop on that one subject and just take some questions about that?
I'm happy to do whatever you do through the chair.
Councillor Hopkins.
Well, Andrew, my question, by the way, I don't recall council ever voting for that floating hour. I know we voted for the 1 hour in the morning, and personally I would favour that and nothing else. But my question really is, of those people who you say are using the facilities but not paying, what do we know how many of them are using the 9 to 10 and how many of them are using this floating hour that I didn't know existed, but which apparently does?
So the data that we capture, so the parking machines become active at 6 o'clock in the morning. So anybody who enters their details into the machine from 6 a.m. And what we're also capturing is the shift workers who are starting early. So at the hospital, who, for instance, are taking advantage of our 8 hour all day parking. So people who are parking, they're coming to work using our off-street car parks, they're actually starting to pay. Most people who come to Ōamaru or who are residents here obviously know that paid parking doesn't start till 10. So a lot of people won't even activate the machine if they're not going to be there after 10 a.m. So it's a little bit difficult to capture exactly what's going on between sort of like your 8 a.m. and your 10 a.m. because then people understand that they need to activate the machines from 10. So just carrying on with that, obviously the people who are utilising the 1 hour free, and just remember the people who are paying are also getting their 1 hour free. So we're getting no revenue from that. The loss of revenue, so we've done some data modelling in regards to that revenue. So the 3,000, the people who are using just the 1 hour free, if we remove the 1 hour free parking, and obviously the cost of parking is $2 per hour, then there's approximately $6,000 in lost revenue per week. And then that obviously affects our projected annual returns in regards to that. So we did some modelling to show what the likelihood would be of if we remove the 1 hour free. And what we saw is that the most likely scenario would be that 50% of people would then just come and park for half an hour in town and do their quick shopping, which is $1. So it's $1 for half an hour or $2 for an hour. People who want to stay for an hour or longer would fall down to about 35%, and there'd be about a 15% drop off completely in people using our parking. And then what we would be likely to see is just over $5,000 a week in revenue on top of the 2,300 that we are seeing now. Obviously, these are just modelling projections and best case scenario.
Sorry, Andrew, just to make it clear for everyone, when we're talking about the hour free parking, we're talking there's two 1 hour free parkings. So the figures, which one's the 9 to 10 and which one would be the modelling for just 1 hour in general?
So that modelling is based on what we have at the moment. Parking starting at 10. Obviously, if it went back to beginning at 9, then we're capturing an extra hour each day. So you could potentially see even more revenue on top of that.
So that's the floating end.
No, yes. So if we removed just the floating hour,
Yes.
then we would see a significant increase in revenue. So with the 1 hour free, our projected revenue at the moment, based on our $2,300 a week, is $1,200, bearing in mind that $120,000, bearing in mind that our costs will be around $48,000 a year. If we remove the 1 hour free, we could be looking projected around $400,000. So these just give you an idea of the sorts of figures that we could be looking at.
Me, Tim,
A couple of quick questions. So first of all, the 9 to 10 hour, if we kept with the current floating hour but moved it back to 9, do you have any idea of what cost savings that we look at? Or extra revenue, I mean?
We could do some, through the chair, sorry, we could do some projections on that. But looking at a heat map in terms of the times that people actually use the parking, and that would change if we remove that. Our busiest times are between 10 and 12, and 9 o'clock we start seeing on some days some quite heavy use. That may change people's behaviours. And what a lot of our shops are actually seeing at the moment is they're very busy in the mornings during that busiest period from 10 till 12. And then in the afternoon, it drops off. So they have quite quiet afternoons. So any changes like that, it's likely to affect people's shopping behaviour as well.
And just through the chair, if I may, I guess looking at the cost, because we're talking about that it's a, what, $48,000, did you say, per annum it costs us an activity? Is that the entire activity, including depreciation and things, or it'd be really good to understand what the entire envelope and a step through of what that means, so we can understand what we're funding, because when we put it like that and we look like we're sitting here, you know, getting in more than they are costing us, and then looking at how we can increase that in a time when our community is probably hurting somewhat, it doesn't look good to me. So I think having that understanding of what the full cost, including depreciation and things of this activity is, would be helpful to understand what we should be doing for good governance.
So through the chair, at the moment, those costs are based on like software licenses and monthly costs in regards to providing the platform, uploading the data from both of our providers for Play My Park as well as Orican. It doesn't include enforcement and it doesn't include depreciation.
Just through the chair, I think that it's a really helpful figure to be aware of, so we can look at the big picture and go, where does the real cost of this activity lie? So when we're talking about, you know, the more we don't, you know, put into it or have our community put into it, the more it costs ratepayers. We need to actually start to understand what that actually looks like.
Thank you. So just moving on to some of the other things that came out of the recent council meeting. At the moment, our disability parking, is anybody with a disability permit from CCS, they have the ability to park in our dedicated disability parks for free in our paid parking areas. And if those parks are occupied, as long as they're displaying their disability card, they're able to park in our other paid parks, and they're still required to enter their registration details into the machine. They still get their hour free, but any parking they pay for is doubled. That's also causing confusion amongst our users of our disability parks. And something that we thought maybe we could look at considering is whether or not we make it free in any of our paid parks for our disability card holders. So that's something that came out through talking actually with our CCS local office in regards to some of the challenges that their staff, caregivers, and also people who have the disability cards are facing. The over 80s, we've actually spoken to a few other councils, Timaru, Dunedin, Invercargill and Gore. And of the ones who actually have free parking for over 80s, they've got really good systems. So we've investigated how the database could work. So we'd need to have set up a database in authority so we can keep track of who has a permit. They'd be required to apply for a permit. They must have a valid driving license, because this is to recognise the fact that, or to celebrate rather, the fact that people 80 years and over are still active and driving in our community. So they would apply for a permit that would be processed, and they'd be given their permit, and they'd reapply every 12 months. So as long as they still have a current driver's license and are able to drive, then we could provide them with a permit. What we need to work out is whether or not it means it's just parking in our off-street car parks or all of our car parks, and to try and keep the administration costs down.
Councillor Lewis.
You've just touched on a question I was going to raise with regards to that, given that drivers of that age are required to renew their licence on that regular basis. How much are we looking at, or what sort of uptake do you sort of expect may happen from that? Has there been any modelling done on that? And also the cost of administering a scheme like that? Do we have an idea?
There was certainly a lot of excitement when it was spoken about at the council meeting, and the next day we had people lining up at the library and downstairs for their free parking permit. I mean, we could look at the demographics. I don't know where we would find information on how many people 80 years and over in our district are still driving. Hopefully it exists somewhere. It may not. There's also been some talk in the community about why not for people 75 and over, or why not people who receive superannuation 65 and over. Obviously, the larger the group you provide it to, the more the administration cost, and it becomes very difficult to keep up with who's entitled, what vehicles they have. If they sell a vehicle, they need to tell us. We have people forgetting that. So that increases the admin side of it. If it was for 80s and over, it would be, once the database is set up, it would be a relatively low admin cost. It's just a person applying, making sure that they had their license, and then our parking officer issuing a permit. Very similar to what we do now with a lot of our businesses who have 12-month permits. A bit of admin, but not too much.
Sorry, through the chair, just to follow up on that, are we looking at levying a charge for the administration on that, do you think, or do you not see that as being a major?
It kind of takes away from looking at it. It kind of takes away from the initiative if you charge people for it. There will be such a small number in the community potentially that it's not going to be a significant cost, but that's something that obviously council can decide on whether there should be a charge for that.
Thank you, Chair. That was just what I was going to say. It would be a council decision if you want to introduce an administration fee for that process.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Actually, you could use the application process to create the database, as long as people turned up with incontrovertible proof of age, then they go on the database. But my question is more, it relates to disability parking spaces generally. I would favour the idea of disability, those with disability cards paying normal fee in a normal car park. What I'm curious about is how rigorously do we patrol and police the disability spaces, because it infuriates me the regular occasions I see people abusing those spaces in supermarkets and on the street. And I really would like to see a more rigorous approach taken to people who are dispossessing those with disabilities of a very limited number of spaces. So what are we doing in that area, Andrew?
So through the chair, I just like to first point out that the supermarkets are a private property, and council doesn't have the ability to carry out enforcement or to police those areas. So for us, it's the disability parks in our off-street car parks and in the main street, and obviously anywhere else in Waitaki District Council controlled areas. Parking officers, well, we have a zero tolerance for people illegally parking in disability parks. But what we find is when an infringement is issued, I would say on average, I'd say at least 90% of the time, it's just somebody's forgotten to display their card. So they will actually then appeal the infringement and send us in a copy of their card, and obviously we withdraw that fee. So most of it's just people with the occasional person taking advantage of those parks.
And just to add, probably the national level of $700 infringement fine now is a pretty good deterrent. Any more questions around that? Or we have to go to the next slide. Sorry. Roger, Mr. Cook.
So, Appendix 1, which was provided in the material, and it's the same appendix that was in the previous council meeting. It just shows maps of the 6 off-street car parks that council controls. So Wansbeck Street between Tyne and Holmes Wharf, Humber Street car park, Wansbeck Street, the corner of Wansbeck Street and Tyne Street, more commonly known as Scott's car park. Lower Wansbeck Street where the bike park car park is, the Penguin Colony, and Itchen Street between T Street and Wharf Street. Another one that isn't in here, and the property department actually spoke to me today about it, is the service lane that runs around behind the Victorian precinct. It doesn't have a legal designation as a road, so it sort of falls into a bit of a grey area, but it could actually be included as a car park, and we could have paid parking in there, or at least make it a little bit tidier and have proper parking in that area. So these additional car parks that I mentioned, I'd just like to say straight off that the Penguin Colony is subject to a lease agreement, and there's really, I included it just to show that it is council car park that's part of a lease. It's not realistic to really introduce paid parking there because it's only utilised in the evenings when the Penguin Colony have their shows, and it's certainly full then, and it'd be up to the Penguin Colony to maybe look at whether or not they wanted to do any charging. But it was just as an example to include it because it is part of the area that we were looking at. So currently these car parks are covered by from roading budgets and projects in regards to maintenance. So we get no revenue from these car parks. Recently, Humber Street was just upgraded with some chip sealing and marking for $25,000. Stage 1 of Scott's was circa $300,000 to establish that, and that's just had chip resealing and marking. So these costs come out of the roading budget, and which is just for small maintenance in off-street car parks, and it includes all of our off-street car parks. So Eden Street and the car parks directly outside here, and that's only around $10,000 a year. So we're not really covering those costs, and I'm just putting it out there that these car parks at the moment have the potential for being converted into paid parking. We have the technology to be able to look at some bespoke tariff charging different areas if they were to be implemented as paid parking. The revenue collected from those areas could be allocated to maintenance. So for instance, we have the ability, so any of the car parks in the wharf area, that money could then be captured and go back into maybe the Harbour Endowment Fund or something like that, or the Victorian precinct. If pedestrianisation was something that was realised for Harbour Street, Scott's car park could then become a dedicated Victorian precinct off-street parking, whether it's free or paid parking. The one thing that I will stress is that, for instance, if you only applied or changed, say, Humber Street and Itchen Street out here to paid parking, you're going to disperse all of those people that normally park there into other areas. So those car parks potentially would become empty, and for instance, Humber Street, majority of people would move a couple hundred metres down the road to Scott's area there, or into Tyne Street, and potentially cause problems there. So what I'm saying is it's a little bit of an all or nothing kind of a scenario. If you do little bits, you're just dispersing the people, and the reasons for doing it wouldn't necessarily be realised. We did some modelling around potentially what we could see in regards to revenue. For these areas, and the modelling was around like some of the car parks, if people utilise them for all day parking at $8, or if half the car parks were only used for say 3 hours a day. And again, this is just modelling, but the figure that we came up with was between $200,000 and $250,000 in extra revenue if all of those parks that we've mentioned were turned into paid parking. Now that's just the modelling, not what we actually might realise.
Councillor Hopkins.
Oh, Andrew, couple of questions. I'm curious to know what the issue with the lease at the penguin colony might be. Equally, your photograph number 3, corner Wansbeck and Tyne. Am I correct in assuming that that land is freehold? And if it is, have we considered subdividing some portion of it, say at the southern end, and selling it for, well, possibly to assist with car park funding? And the other question I have is, there's a very obvious omission from all of these photographs, and that is Tyne Street. Why aren't we looking at meters there? It's the most parked space in the precinct, and it would be perfectly legitimate, particularly if Harbour Street becomes pedestrian, for that to be the case, in my view. I'm just curious why it's been omitted.
It wasn't included because at the previous council meeting, when the additional off-street car parks were discussed, it wasn't included. It's not to say that it couldn't be included. Part of the feedback that we got back from Whitestone Civic Trust was that they were pleased that it wasn't included. At the moment, as councillors will be aware, it's a mixture of time limited parking, like P30, P15, P60s, some loading zones as well. In regards to the car park in the corner of Wansbeck and Tyne Street, the area you're talking about was recently, that's the Scott's car park. It was recently sealed, and like this, sorry, this.
This west, between the Scott's car park and Tyne Street. If you look at the photograph,
You're talking
there's
about
a very small number of cars at the southern end, and that's normally the case. And what I'm suggesting is the space is bigger than the demand, and it might be worthwhile looking at actually using some of that land for an alternative purpose.
So you're looking at the corner of Tyne Street and Waterfront Road?
No, photograph 3, Wansbeck and Tyne.
That space that you've highlighted there in pink is actually part of the sealed car park at Scott's, which was.
Yes, my question is, it's seldom used. Might it be an option to consider using it for another purpose?
It very may well be, but that's outside my area. That'd be something for the property department rather than that.
You do raise a good point there, Jim, and I think it got raised in the last committee about our strategies that we have in place. And the financial strategy, is this the best use for parking, or is there other ways to offset those maintenance and capital spends that we have in that area? But I don't know which committee that would fit in, but it is a good discussion point. I've got a speaking order. I had Mr. Cook, and I had Councillor Lewis, Deputy Mayor Ryan, and Courtney, Councillor Linwood, and then McCone. Roger.
Yeah, I think it has been covered, but thank you. I just wanted to say that the sale of land is not within the scope of the parking strategy. We're talking whether it's $2 and whether it starts at 9, not how many hundreds of thousands we can sell bits of land in the CBD for.
Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Just to go back to something you said before, Mr. Barsley, with regards to it being all or nothing, that you would need to, otherwise it's just going to effectively shift the problem. In that instance, would you be recommending a lower rate on those other for example, Itchin Street or if we were Tyne Street or whatever, would you be looking at a lower rate as an attractive proposition to remain parking there because you're not going to get a better deal? Because if it was the same rate as anywhere else, then that's not going to alleviate a congestion issue.
I wouldn't like to make any suggestions on what I think should be appropriate, but as I pointed out, we have the ability to have bespoke tariffs. You know, it would be very easy to have a different tariff for the harbour area versus the Victorian precinct versus the CBD. You could have well, we decided that a couple of years ago when we were doing the parking fees and charges, when we increased the parking fees to $2 an hour, that we would make it exactly the same for on-street and off-street. But it's a very easy thing to do with the technology we have now to have different zones to make it more attractive for people parking. You could even have free parking at certain times, and then maybe only in weekends in certain areas. And Scott's car park is unusual in that it's empty during the day, but in the weekends it's very busy. And we have our tourists and people coming and visiting. And do we want to take advantage of that or not? And as I said, if you make some of the other areas paid parking, you're going to push people into that space. So then it may very well become a very busy car park during the day, or it may stay predominantly empty. So we need to be quite smart around if we were to charge, maybe it would just be in the weekends and it might be $1 for an hour or something like that. We certainly can do that.
Thank you. Just to sort of follow up from that, because the rate does have an impact on the projections as far as revenue going forward. If we're looking at actually a differential rate for some of those, it's not going to be at for example, $2 an hour. So that's going to have an impact on what we perceive we could actually collect. Just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
My question was actually very similar to what Councillor Lewis's was, because I guess really thinking about simplicity, but then also like not just applying a one size fits all, given I guess the different areas of, you know, the CBD, we need turnover for retail, and the harbour and precinct is more of like that community. So I guess, yeah, I was sort of really interested in what that bespoke tariff structure could look like and what opportunity there would be for flexibility there, given kind of the flow on. But you've kind of addressed it. So my other question was, have we explored what a reduced free period could achieve versus like removing it entirely?
I think anecdotally, what we see is people coming in for their 1 hour free parking, but they're done and dusted, you know, within 30 minutes. And speaking to some shop owners, it's the mindset of, I have 1 hour free. I can go to any parking machine and increase it if I need to. But then that mindset for them is, oh, I'll go and do some window shopping. And a business owner I know says that they get people coming into their shop and they talk to them about parking, but they only come in because they know that they've got that hour free. So removing it completely would change people's shopping behaviour, and reducing it down to half an hour would also change people's behaviours. So we're kind of talking a little bit of crystal ball gazing, but we have a lot of options.
Councillor Linwood, then Councillor McCone.
Thank you. And through the chair, sorry, I'm going to take you back to the pictures again. Just noting that I'd probably have a conflict of interest in this area, so I wouldn't vote on it if it come down to it. But I am curious. So we're looking at the Scott's Farmers Market car park, and if that was the area that you were going to consider metering, what about the east side of that? So that, what would you do there? Because I don't know if you've seen it in the weekend when it's chaotic busy. There's events on, there's cars parked all the way down right onto Waterfront Road. I think you'd just be pushing them from the paid parking into that area, and it would just get a little bit messy.
Yeah, so through the chair, obviously if you were to make it paid parking, and it's going towards stage 2. I'm not sure what stage 2 is going to look like, but surfacing and putting in you know, painted lines and some delineations around where the parking is, and you could still have some free parking for, what do you call them, campers, and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd agree. It is quite untidy at the moment, but the area which is kind of sealed at the moment towards the northern end of that, I would imagine would look like what the western side does, and then potentially something for buses or coaches or camper vans in the other area. But I think it would be important to tidy it up to make it more obvious where you could and couldn't park.
Councillor McCann.
As one that's not on this committee, but I'm just going to have a say anyway, if that's okay. So sitting here for the last 3/4 of an hour wondering about $2 an hour. There's a slide up there that said, keep it simple. And I think that's what you got to keep it simple. If you go to our neighbour south, you get charged the minute you get in that car park to the minute you leave. I myself had to pay $21 for 40 minutes in Queenstown the other day. Timaru's vicious as well. Don't also forget that $500,000 worth of income, and it shouldn't be treated as income, it should be treated as user pays, is the equivalent of 1% off your rate. So rob Peter to pay Paul. And at the end of the day, your $2 an hour, it's probably cost you with today's fuel price $5 to get there. So, and you're probably going into that retail shop and probably spend $50 or $60. So what is $2? And it turns it over for the retailers. So, you know, you may say you can go to the north end above the retailer system. Those guys have got car parks, but I guarantee it's built into their overhead. So you actually pay for it one way or the other. So I don't see a problem. And I think we've got far bigger fish to fry than worry about $2 an hour for a car park. And just as an add to that though, there must be some discretion given to the likes of Itchen Street or the back of Humber Street for the people that work at this end that have no other options. Otherwise it's $45 a week to park here, and that's not fair.
Thank you. Mr. Coucher.
And just a couple of things. We don't have any differential between people passing through and local people. The more money we can take off the people passing through that are enjoying our facilities, the better. The local ratepayers have some major costs coming up in other areas. Now, if we look back a little bit here, to keep it simple, what did it used to be when we had parking meters that took a bit of money, you pulled in, you paid your money, and such it went on. So how simple was that? What are we looking at compared to that? I think this free bit and all the other bits is miles too complicated. Totally agree with Councillor McCann. Make it simple. You put your money in when you get there, and then all you got to decide is where you're going to charge. Scott's, it needs to be on both sides. You need to sort the car park out on the east side, and then charge for the whole lot and be done with it.
Councillor Slack.
Also not being part of this committee, but I just want to echo what Councillor McCone and Mr. Kelcher have said, it keep it simple. I think I've said it before. If you go to Dunedin, and the first thing I look for is how do I park? How do I pay for the parking? And it doesn't matter whether I'm in Dunedin or whether I go to Timaru or Christchurch. Why do we have to be so different? Keep it simple. Totally agree with it and what the others have said in it.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis. Cowles Glenwood.
Just for context, I can give a wee bit of background with regards to the hours with it starting at 10 o'clock. Because I go back a few years, I was part of the negotiations on that probably nearly 25 years ago when we moved over from the lollipop style parking meters to the electronic ones that came in. And that was a decision that was made, and I was representing the Chamber of Commerce at the time. And that was a deal that we negotiated whereby there was free parking up until 10 o'clock in the morning. And then after 1 o'clock on a Saturday and all day Sunday was free. Effectively from a business community perspective that we hadn't been consulted, and that was what we felt we salvaged at the time. But as I say, that is nearing 25 years ago. So things have changed a bit in that time. So I just wanted to provide that as a wee bit of context as to why our structured time as far as parking hours is possibly a wee bit different from everywhere else. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, again, someone who's not on the committee, but look, I'm in agreement. I think the more simple this could be, the easier it is for people. Exactly what Fran said. When I go to another city, town or anything, the first thing I do is look for where am I going to pay and how do I pay for it. Technology has moved to this. Unfortunately, we can't keep technology here it was, but we do get used to it. And I'm of exactly the same mind. I go to another place and I expect to pay. And also, I just to clarify, and I think I've asked this before, but currently the revenue comes in, does that subsidise the business rates? Is that correct? So that would lower the rates that our businesses are paying, is that correct?
Through the chair, that's my understanding. I'm getting a nod from the director next to me.
Thank you. And through the chair, just want to touch quickly, you've written in here potentially it's in scope that we could reintroduce cash options on the machines. What 1,500 per unit, how many units do we have? Like, would it be a pretty big investment? Do you think it would be worthwhile or not? Not really.
We have 39 units. My maths isn't that good off the top of my head. Sorry. I just put that in so you could have an idea. The conversations around not being able to pay by cash have died down somewhat. I've done quite a bit of engagement with people who have come into council to question that and over the phone and pointed out the other options that we have and the fact that at the moment we still have quite a number of free parking areas. And once I've actually sort of explained to them where they can park without having to use coins, and a lot of people don't have the cards that they're able to do the tap and go. Once we've had a discussion and I've sort of explained where they can park for free, plus they have their 1 hour for free at the moment or P60s or whatever, then they tend to be quite accepting of that and realise that, oh, I do actually have options at the moment.
So I'll just take a comment from Mr. Cook before Mayor Tavendale.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just before we move on from that point, Andrew, does the $1,500 per unit for cash options, is that just to change the unit over? That doesn't allow for the increased cost of banking and emptying the machines and the increased maintenance because of the mechanical moving parts, is that correct?
That's correct. That's just to replace the base plate, which would take the coin mechanism. Before we went to the new parking machines, given that the old ones were about 80% non-operational, people were still putting money in them, and the ones who were working were getting money in them, and it was costing us $800 a month for that cash to get collected, those coins to get collected, and they have to be taken to Dunedin and processed because none of the banks here accept coins from businesses for banking. Waitaki District Council's bank doesn't accept coins, so they had to go through. So we would obviously need to factor that in, that it would be $800. And the other thing is the maintenance costs increase because you've got moving parts. In the old machines, the coin mechanisms after a while became worn, coins got stuck. People, for whatever reason, stick all sorts of foreign objects into them and become jammed. That's not, that frequent, but it does cause issues.
Mayor Tavendale.
I know we're just getting feedback at this stage. I guess some of my concerns, the reason for the 1 hour for myself is to kind of counter the use of cash or the lack of being able to use cash, because I think we do need to recognise that we have a large elderly population which are struggling in this space. And we've had strong feedback from the likes of Age Concern and from Grey Power in this conversation. So there could be an argument for the removing of the 1 hour from 9 to 10, but keeping that other 1 hour so that we do have still the ability for those that don't carry other options to still be able to actually park and take part in society in general. I guess my big concern on just timings around this conversation is we've got an annual plan in front of us, which is looking at costs increases for our community. We've got cost increase for our community around fuel and just cost of living. Things are just hitting in every stage, and we've got a lot of big things on our plate and a lot of uncertainty. I understand the way this works, which is why I'd like to understand a little bit more about the whole of life sort of cost of things and how we fit that into our budgeting. But I think we also need to work out what is important for us to take to our community, and as sometimes we spend the most time on the smallest battles, and these are things that really do matter to our community. So I'm probably a little bit worried about the fatigue in our community for constant cost increases. I know it's really easy to sort of say, hey, $2 an hour is really cheap. And it is, but then if we're looking at all day parking and what that adds to someone's week and that kind of thing, there is a discussion to be had here. And I think that the wider discussion over where we extend parking, while valid, and the workload we have in front of us as a council, we look at simplifying local government and things like that. I feel like we need it like a hole in the head, to be perfectly frank. And sometimes we just need to look at our overall work plan and decide when it makes most sense for us to have some conversations that we know are going to be thorny, difficult conversations for our community to take on board. It might be the right conversation, but maybe the wrong time.
Part of that there was timelines, which aren't in this report. Did you have any timelines with the strategy of what you envisaged the next steps?
I guess as a workshop, I really just wanted to sort of put it out there that these are the issues that have been brought up as a result of this. Obviously, whenever you talk about parking, people become very emotive about it. You got your 1 hour free, and I guess the good thing is the constant of the fact that we haven't increased the cost of parking. So it's really down to how we want to, if you take away the additional paid parking areas, about simplifying what we have at the moment. And that's something that could be addressed through a paper to council, very quickly, if it was just about removing the 1 hour free or changing it from 9 in the morning, and the over 80s and the disability parking issues. That those are real easy, quick fixes. Those ones. The other material is. It's just to show you that we have options, that we have these car parks that cost us a little bit of money and that we're not getting any revenue from. That's what it's here for.
I think I was Councillor Hopkins, then Mr. Murdoch.
Yeah, look, noting the Mayor's comments about constant cost increases, I probably want to say that cost increases in relation to rates is probably of greater impact than cost increases in relation to parking charges. But picking up on the Mayor's other comment about people here using cash and Mr. Kelcher's comments about benefiting locals, I would argue that it may well be, I think we're probably stuck with starting at 10. I think taking away that hour would cause great angst locally. And quite clearly, it is a benefit that would actually be appreciated more frequently and be of greater financial assistance to residents than it would be to visitors who pass through once a year. Equally, if we want to make sure that we charge visitors, then we have to accept that the precinct is potentially not quite as significant as the CBD in terms of retail activity, but certainly right up there. And I believe we should be probably looking at increasing charging areas around that space because they are more likely to be utilised by visitors. And I come back to the point I made earlier about Tyne Street. It's a glaring and lamentable omission. And the argument, which might well be that a parking meter is a modern intrusion, well, there's an awful lot of modern intrusions on Tyne Street, including most obviously the cars themselves. And if we accept them, I don't see why we shouldn't accept parking meters as well. So I would like to see Tyne Street included as a potential area from which revenue from paid spaces could be charged.
Mr. Murdoch.
I'd just like to ask, with the 2 car parks we have with EV charging facilities, do we get revenue from them?
Through the chair, I don't think so. I'm not aware of, you've got one in Scots and one in, got them in Scots and Eden Street car park. I don't know whether there's an arrangement, a lease arrangement with the power companies having them there or not. That's not something that's part of the parking infrastructure.
As they're in our car parks, do you think that revenue from that would definitely help?
Any revenue would help, but as I said, I'm not sure what, if any arrangements we have at the moment.
Did you want to add something, Mr. Clark?
Yes. If all these all these photographs of the car parking, potential car parking, if you've done the costing on what that would cost and the ongoing administration for all that?
Well, some of the car parks are already marked out, and it would just be signage and the implementation of putting parking machines there. Obviously, Scott's car park is the one that would be the most cost, but they're looking at doing a stage 2 there at the moment. So for additional paid parking, it's signage and parking meters. And depending on the if decisions were made on what areas would change, that affects the cost of the number of parking machines and the amount of signage that we need to do.
Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but the thought of putting paid parking around the precinct is a bit, I probably wouldn't agree with that. You know, we're really only becoming a tourist destination. I'd hate to be scaring people off from parking. I mean, if we go, the Harbour Street becomes pedestrianised, the idea of moving the cars down to Scott's car park is important, and the attraction of having free parking there, I thought would be a good thing to have.
Yeah, Tim Dow.
Just in a wish to land a plane, and I know there's a whole lot of thoughts around this process, but perhaps it could be asking for a paper to come to council, and that could be discussed in the 1 hour free, like the 9 to 10 conversation, with a recommendation from staff, and we can do with that what we will. There also being a recommendation coming to council on the over 80s and on the clarifying the mobility car park conversation, and then perhaps that can also have a suggestion around the wider parking strategy about when we want to do that, or if there's a time frame, because I mean, I do have concerns around the timeframes of that, but I do take your point in the clarification space, trying to get really simple rules around what we're doing. That might be a way of getting some forward momentum, and that way we can get a nice, clear process moving forward, and we can then decide what the appetite is around the table for taking that wider.
Yeah, it's up to management.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the clarification. So if I think that'll make it easy, and we can step through the conversation then one by one and land on something, and you guys have something clear to work from.
Yeah, thanks for summing up for me, Mel. We are scheduled at 2:15, so we can take some more questions around it, and anything else you want to present, Andrew, if there is anything else on the feedback or stakeholder engagement. So we do have time if there's any more.
The shared screen's dropped off, but it really was just the fact that we have done some engagement with approximately 35 businesses in the area. Limited feedback, but predominantly against additional paid parking areas, and Washington Civic Trust wanting to keep Tyne Street as it is. Some support for Humber Street becoming paid parking, but overall not in favour of any changes down in regards to off-street car parking.
Councillor Wilkins.
Yeah, sorry, to me that's tough. There's a hint of NIMBYism about that. And the argument, I'm sorry, I don't want to argue with Graham, but I will, insofar as if there is an argument for saying, oh, you will chase people away if you have a charge for parking in the precinct, the same argument could absolutely apply to Thames Street and CBD. And essentially, I'm sorry, there is absolutely no reason why visitors who don't pay to go into the gallery, who don't pay to go into the library,
Through the Mayor, through
who
the
don't
Chair,
pay to
please.
go into the museum, there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't contribute in some way to the cost of running this district. And in my view, it's perfectly reasonable if we charge those who want to shop in the CBD to park, then we could and should charge the majority of those who choose to shop in the precinct the same.
Mayor Tavendale, and then
I just think we don't need to enter into the debate today because it's not, I don't think entering the debate today is going to get us where we need to land. We're not trying to debate the issue and to get an outcome. We're trying to find a way forward to have this conversation. So it's a process, this conversation today.
so Councillor Lewis, then Deputy Mayor Ryan, and then Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. Just off the back of what Mayor Tavendale has sort of proposed, I'd just like to have the clarification on the time change, because we talk about free hour, but the free hour's been double dipped effectively. And actually that being moving the 9 till 10 effectively. If we're saying the business day starts at 9, I note from your report that most other districts are 8 a.m. So that part of that work as well to be there, because we could still keep an element of that free floating hour if we so chose, or half hour or whatever was determined. But I think it would be quite useful if it was actually aligned maybe back to 9 o'clock. That way it gives us a wee bit of clarity and it's a bit easier for people to understand as well. So.
Thank you. And through the chair, like, obviously in your paper I bring back to council, we'll have options in there in regards to 8 or 9 and the floating hour, retaining it or whatever. And just thank you for clarifying earlier on the mystery about how it all came about. I know who to blame now.
Well, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. And through the chair, if we're talking about, I guess, influencing or changing parking behaviours and the rising cost of living, is it fair to consider as part of like the strategy discussions how it connects to walking and cycling and, you know, encouraging more active transport in that space for those who are obviously able to do that? Or am I?
Let's put it up to $10 an hour and really encourage people to cycle. I mean, obviously things like what's going on now, geopolitically will influence people maybe cycling a little bit more, and it's fantastic to see people out using their cycles. But I don't necessarily think we're looking at changing parking behaviour, because we don't necessarily have a problem with parking behaviour. It's just the confusion around the hours of parking. But if that's something you'd like us to look at, we can do something in there.
I guess just supplementary, I was probably more thinking about like literal bike parking infrastructure, you know, where that sits if we are trying to encourage, you know, as well as solving this problem where that sort of sits.
Funnily enough, we have had, through the chair, we've had some questions around where are the bike parks? The old school of chaining it around a lamppost sort of still works, but you don't want to create clutter. But that obviously is a cost as well. But I could speak to our infrastructure team and just sort of see whether they had any ideas around where we could provide those bike parks.
Hannah.
Thank you. Just I know that it seems out of scope with the strategy or the action plan that's been developed, but I just had some questions around the thinking around the monitoring and the FTE component that would need to be considered if we're going to extend more and more car parks. Who's going to be able to monitor it? The other thing is just around the infrastructure of the car parking and the maintenance programming for, you know, like for us to consider. Has that been included in the broader scope of things, even though it's not in the actual scope of what we're discussing here, but it is actually part of the overall picture, for us to kind of get a handle on the end-to-end continuum of the costing and the resource required to maintain not just the administration, but the monitoring and the compliance part. Is that being considered, or?
Is that in reference to the additional car parking areas or just the clarification.
Maybe
once-
just the additional, if we are considering that if there's going to be a paper report, this is what, like the anticipated forecasting of, like what it's going to cost us or what resources required. But then also, you got 54 parking spaces in one area, you got 60 parking spaces in another. There's quite a big amount with a lot of traffic that could be, you know what I mean? Like taking.
So at the moment, our infrastructure team have their contracts for the maintenance of the car parks. And if you were to introduce paid parking into some of these car parking areas, then some of that revenue could be set aside for the maintenance and upkeep of those car parks, which then takes it out of that maintenance contract, which is paid through rates. So it would actually be a user pays model where the revenue from that parking would be used for the upkeep and any maintenance. And also, I take your point about if we were to increase those areas, there would likely be a need for some sort of an FTE component, because you're looking at a larger area and more time. Again, whether or not some of that additional revenue could be set aside for that. At the moment, our parking enforcement is undertaken by our locality officers, so their time's split between the locality duties and parking. And we would need to look at that as well.
Thank you. Do we have any other, Councillor Schlatt?
Yeah, through the chair, just for my understanding how the system can be used, how easy would it be, the way you control the whole parking system, to declare a free parking day or for a certain event, or is that too cumbersome to execute?
Through the chair, it's actually very easy. Orican and ADR Riley, who do our Pay My Park app, and Orican, who supply the machines and the infrastructure, we would just inform them that on a certain day between certain times or over a period of time, we get free parking. They then upload that through to the system and the parking machines would display. So for instance, for our Orican is an Australian company, and so we clarify what our public holidays are for them, and they ensure that the parking machines display that it's free parking. So Friday and Monday, the machines displayed that it was free parking because it's a public holiday. So it's actually quite easy. There's a small cost in regards to doing that.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, just a very quick question. Do we know how long it takes to recoup the capital cost of purchasing and installing a meter? On average.
When we were doing the procurement, we did some modelling on based on the $2 per hour, and the modelling predominantly was based on removing the 1 hour free, because initially that was where we were going, and then that was retained. And for the procurement model that we chose, which was purchasing the machines outright, it was just over 2 years.
Thank you.
Well, I think we probably you would have enough direction from today's discussion of where we're heading to next. Thanks for that paper, Andrew. Before we do move on, I know as a new committee, as we're looking at our work stream for the year, there's been questions about projects and bits and pieces of what happening. So for the next meeting, I think we need to maybe focus on a wider on the Ōamaru Central and Northern Master Plans, which take in the harbour area and other bits and pieces. But just to keep new members there and everyone up to date, and looking at projects which may or may not be in the long-term plan or annual plan. But you want to add to that, Lisa?
Certainly. So through the chair and I have met and looking at a work plan for this committee, since it has broadened its scope from the old harbour area committee. So looking at the Central Ōamaru Master Plan, looking at the Northern Ōamaru Master Plan, and where projects are, if they've been done, completed, sitting in the long-term plan, or if they have actually fallen out of the long-term plan. And we hope to bring a bit of a draft work plan through to the next committee, so we can, as a group, work out where our focus should be, and also ascertaining what type of update information that this committee would like to bring in from the areas covered off by the Ōamaru committee as well. So that'll give us a bit more clarity in our purpose and ability to ask some of the questions around some of the earlier projects that we've lost a bit of clarity on at the moment.
Any discussion around those points? Mr. Clark?
So I guess we've got to study all those plans from last year. Yeah. Right.
Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, picking up on what was in the strategy and advocacy committee this morning, I think the harbour strategy committee, the harbour strategy is overdue for review. So that could be part of those conversations that Lisa's just mentioned. I mean, we may not change it at all, but it's probably worth just having a look at.
Everyone happy with that? So we'll move back to before we close the meeting, the recommendations that we had from the Ōamaru additional areas. Does someone like to move that we receive and note that information? Moved by Deputy Mayor Ryan, seconded Mr. Lewis. All those in favour? Against? That's carried, and thanks for everyone's participation today, and we'll declare the meeting closed.
My dad.